Grass is everywhere. It doesn't matter what sort of projects you tend to do in Blender, at one point or another you're going to need grass. Now, there's some good third-party options out at the moment. In fact, I am developing one myself for Blender Market. But that's not always what you want. Sometimes there'll be licensing restrictions, or maybe you need something very specific. Sometimes you need to make the grass yourself. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's start up a new Blender scene, or relatively new in my case, and get going. Let's press Shift A, Mesh, Plane, to add in a plane, and then rotate that along the X-axis by 90 degrees, and then jump to front view by pressing numpad 1 and orthographic mode with numpad 5. That didn't look right to me. Weird. Anyway, let's zoom in and get started on this. Now, we're going to be making the grass to a real sort of size. And this sort of grass that I'm doing today is going to be cut grass, so it's going to be about 3 to 4 centimeters long. And editing at that scale in Blender is really annoying if you're assuming one Blender unit is a meter. So what we'll do is we'll make the grass big and then we'll shrink it down. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, grab these two vertices up the Z-axis to there, like so, and then I'll grab these up to there. Yeah. Then with all selected, I'll scale along the X-axis to about there. Yeah, that's about right. And then press Ctrl R and add in 3 loop cuts, giving us 4 segments of our grass. And then all we need to do is shape it a little bit. So we'll grab these two and scale them in, scale those in 2, and then these are actually looking a little bit fat as well. So we'll bring those in. There we go, a grass blade. Now, what we're going to be doing is making little clumps of grass. I'm going to make one, and then we're going to magically jump over to another layer where I've already done them, because it's a bit time consuming. But you'll be able to get the general idea. So I'm turning on proportional editing here, tabbing back into edit mode, grab these two, and then we'll just grab these along the Y-axis. Where's my proportional editing gone? There we go. And why did I sound a bit Liverpool there? That's weird. Anyway, I'm just kind of manipulating these. With the proportional editing to give us the sort of look we want. Yeah, something about there will do good. And then we'll just select all of the vertices, hit Shift D, and then rotate around the Z-axis. That's not good, is it? No, we need to change the pivot point to 3D cursor. If your 3D cursor's moved, which does happen, press Shift S, cursor to center, and then there we go. Okay, so Shift D. Ugh, I've still got proportional editing on. You're an idiot, Bill. You know what that means as well, don't you? It means I've created multiple blades here. But that's easy enough to fix. There we go. That should be all of them. Cool. So we need a total of 6 blades in a sort of fanned out fashion. Looks like some sort of excited starfish. Anyway, there we go. And now we'll just change the scale of some of these so they're not all the same. Scale that one down. Try not to have, you see how there we've got one big obvious big one. We don't want that, because when the particle system comes in, even when you've got plenty of variations, it's still easy to spot those being duplicated, so we'll avoid that. Yeah, so something like that is about right. Ish. You'll see what I mean in a moment anyway. Now, as I said, we're going to be creating lots of variations of these, because if you were to just use that one model and then distribute that over your particle system, it would be hideously obvious that you've used just one model, and it would look very, very fake. So I'm going to delete that, jump over to layer 2, where I've got this grass down here. Now I've already scaled this, so that's not very good, is it? I should have made sure that was not done. But yeah, if we scale these up to, where is it, scale 100? Yeah, so that's the size we just modelled, give or take, I think. What's going on? Yeah, so that's the size we just modelled, about 4 meters high. Scale it down by 0.01, and it will give you the correct size. Ish. Yeah, up the z-axis is 0.04, which is 4 centimeters in Blender terms. Again, if you're assuming one Blender unit is a meter. And you'll see here what we've got is 2 clumps of 6 blades, 2 of 5, 2 of 4, 2 of 3, and then another 2 of 6 that are a bit smaller. Done that because the particle system, even though we're going to be using a random size, I just found having the smaller ones in there helped break it up a little bit. It's kind of an optional step, but there's no reason not to do it, so I would if I were you. But before we go any further, select all of our grass blades, rotate them 90 degrees on the y-axis, I suppose. X-axis? Yeah, the y-axis. 90 degrees. So they're on their side. That's just to make it work with the particle system. I don't know why you need to do that. I honestly don't. But you do. And then what I'll do is add in another plane. And we'll set this to be 1 meter by 1 meter. And that will be the plane we're going to use for the particle system. That's what we're going to put our grass. But before we do that, we need to add all these blades into a group. So with them all selected, hit Control G, and we'll call these grass blades 01. I'm calling it 01 because you might want to be creating more than one type of grass for a scene. So it's good to have a good naming convention so you can keep on track of what you're doing. Keep on track of what you're doing. Whatever. I have to apologise, my brain is numb today. I've been up since 5 AM and it's now long past that. So I apologise if I make very little sense. I'll do my best though. Right. Why aren't you fucking... There we go. Okay, so with the plane selected, let's hit New Particle System. And we'll call it Grass 01 System. And... in fact, I'm going to change the naming convention to will be the same, so this will be Grass 01 Blades. And we'll call this Grass 01 Particle Setter System. Yeah, there we go. And we'll change it to Hair. Then change it to Advanced. And what we need to do now is make sure that the size that we've painstakingly made sure is accurate here is replicated in our particle system. So easy way to do that, change your hair length to 1, which will automatically change your normal geometry to 0.25. They're linked, so if you increase one it increases the other. You want that at 1, and then under size we want that at 1 as well. With those settings, the models that we're about to put in will be exactly the size that we've dictated. I hope. Then under these render settings, we're going to select group, and we've already got grass blades. We've also got grassblades.001. That's probably because I imported those models from another scene, but we'll just pretend they're not there. And then just from adding it there, you can see the size is correct, which is good. We're going to turn on rotation, which now works nicely, and also pick random. While we're at it, we're also going to change the distribution to random rather than jittered. I'm not even sure why jittered is there. Maybe one of you guys can tell me in the comments, but I've never found it to be a good way of distributing particles, at least for this type of thing. Maybe when you're using actual hair it's good, I don't know. I don't really use hair that much. Anyway, stop chatting rubbish. What we are going to need though is more particles, so let's try 17,000. Oh, that's a lot, isn't it? Can we get away with a bit less? Kinda. Yeah, we'll keep it on that for now, just so my computer doesn't explode, preferably. Yeah, I think that looks alright. Okay, so a few more settings before we get past this relatively easy stage and onto the fun stuff. We want a random size. We don't want these to all be the same size, so let's try 0.4. Should do the trick. And then under rotation, we'll enable rotation. We'll set this to the global z-axis. That way, with global z selected, even if your mesh is kind of not a flat surface, because grass can be on hills, can't it? The grass will still point upwards, which tends to be how grass works. It grows upwards towards the sun. At least that's my understanding of it. Then we've got these random values here. We want this one set to 1, which will give them a nice random rotation. You can actually go even further than that with 2, can't you? Yeah. Whatever looks right to you. I don't think it will make a huge amount of difference in this case. There we go. And then this other random is the what's the easiest way to put it? The slant, I suppose, in this case. We only want a little bit of that, too much, and it will look like it's being blown over in a nuclear blast or something. So about 0.2 should do the trick. I do think we're going to need more particles, though. Let's get that up to 18,000. Yeah, that should do the trick. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Our particle system is done. All we need to do now is, in fact, I'll do this from nodes view. Now this is a panel you won't have. You probably heard me say that before. I've actually decided my next video after this one, maybe a short one, of how I set up my UI, which I'll then reference in other videos, just so if you want to get your setup the same way to me, then you can. But for now, yeah, that'll do. Stretch this out a bit. Everything looks a little squished because I've got, well, squished to me, I mean, because I've got the UI scaling up for recording. I don't tend to have everything so big normally, but hey. And then on this one, I'm going to focus on a blade. In fact, what I'll do, I'm going to duplicate one of these, and then I'm going to move it to that layer over there. And then if I unlink that, hit 1, I can have that on a different layer. Perfect. And zoom that in. It's just, I want to see the individual blades of grass when we're working on the material. In fact, what I'll do, I'll remove that from the group so it doesn't affect the particle system, and scale it up like so. And then we can turn this one to, I'll create a material now, so we'll call this grass 01 material. And I've just realised we're going to need that on all the other ones, aren't we? Oh. So if I select one of these, give that grass 01, press Ctrl L, and copy materials, and then just give that a colour so we can easily see it. Brilliant. So all of our bits of grass have got the same material to work with. And then we'll turn that to rendered mode, and then that to rendered mode. Ta-da! And we're ready to get to work. Right. Now, you'll see there's already nice lighting in the scene. I put in a HDR before we started. So that's why that looks nice. Make sure you get some good lighting, otherwise you'll never get the results you're after. And now we can see it in rendered mode. I'm definitely happy with the particle system. That already looks pretty damn nice. So now we can get started with the fun stuff. Now, we're going to be building this up in sections. It's quite a complicated material to get right. So, yeah, let's see how it goes. So, first thing we're going to do is the base colour. Now for that we're going to need a gradient texture, and we're going to need a... Oh, I forgot a really important step. Really, really important. I hope you're not doing this along with me, because otherwise you're going to be swearing at me right now. But just after you create your first bit of grass, it's very, very, very important to create a UV map for them. If I jump over to, I can't believe I forgot that. This is the third time I've recorded the tutorial, and I've made such a big deal about saying how important that is in the previous recordings, and then in this one, I forget. Idiot. Oh well, mistakes happen. Just go with the flow, Bill, go with the flow. But yeah, if I tab into edit mode, all my grass blades have this. So when I unwrapped them, they looked like that. And then I scaled it up to fill the UV area. It just makes it easier for the gradient texture to work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But do that on the first blade before you even start making the first clump, because then it will all be duplicated for every single blade. Very, very important. Apologies already for forgetting that. You stupid, stupid man. Anyway, let's pretend I didn't forget that, and we'll just carry on. So now we need to input a texture coordinate, drop in the UV, and then if I press Shift, Control, and left click, it will create a little viewer node on that gradient material, gradient texture, if you've got Rodent Angler enabled. And then we can zoom in on this blade and see what it's doing. So you see it's got a bit of a gradient going from white to black. We can grab a color node, color ramp, sorry, to make that a bit more obvious. So if I drag that one down to there and that one to there, you'll see what the gradient texture is doing. It's because it's generating it from that UV. There's no way of getting that result that I know of. In fact, I'm going to just check. What if we use a location from the object? Nope. Yeah, the only way that's going to work is if you do that UV. So yeah, apologies. Anyway, so with this color ramp, we're going to color our grass. So I'm going to add in another little whatever you call them, knobbly bit, that's what I'm going to call it, and we'll set these to about 0.45 and 0.55 and set that to right in the middle at 0.5. Perfect. And now we can change the color of these to color our grass. So let's get a grassy sort of color here. Ooh, too zoomed in. Ooh. Something about there. Yeah, that should work. You'll probably find what I tend to do is I do my best guess, make the particle system how I want it, and then compare it to actual grass, and then tweak the values. It's a lot easier than trying to get it right when you're just working with the blades at the early stages, because it is hard to tell. Making this middle one a yellow one, and then if you look at the blades, it's giving it that kind of stem sort of effect. Now, not all grass has that. Some species of grass do, some don't, or if they do, it's not very obvious. So that's now a nice tweakable value that we can change as we need. But for this type of grass, it works nicely. And that's pretty much it for the base color, as it were. Now what we need to do is build on that. So what we'll do is, in fact, what I'm going to do first, we're going to keep things nice and neat. So I'll create a frame, drop that in there, and we'll call that frame base color, and give it a little color, funny enough, maybe green for grass. Yeah, okay. Okay, next stage is to create a bit of variation in the grass. We're going to create two types of variation. First one is going to be noised based, so I'm going to grab a noise texture. Now, by default, that's not going to work well for us whatsoever. But if I select the object and then up the scaling a little, you'll see overall now those values that we have are going to give us a bit of variation in the grass. Okay, so I'm going to grab a color mix node and I'm going to feed our base color into there, and then I'm going to get a hue and saturation node, also feed the base color into it. In fact, I'll draw a line with shift held down and give us one of those little blobbly nodule things, and then boom in there, select that as the one to view, and then for this one I can muck around with the values to give us some variation. Now, because it's a color ramp, not a color ramp, a noise texture that's going to be feeding this, it will not be that noticeable unless we get a color ramp, drop it in there, and just increase the contrast a little. There we go. If I do that, there we go. Now we can clearly see the different areas of the grass. I'll minimize that down, and we don't actually want that. What we want to do is slightly change the hue of the second one, maybe in the other direction. No, I quite like that. There we go. So that's our first bit of variation. So let's put that in a frame as well, and we'll call this noise variation, and I'll give it kind of an orangey color. Sweet. And then we'll move on to our next stage, which is going to be blade variation. And what I need for that is a object info node, and then if we check out the final input of that, you'll notice that every blade now has its own, well, not every blade, but every cluster of blades has a random grayscale value between white and black, which is really useful. In fact, you would have seen this method of variations quite a few times on my tutorials, but I'll still go through what I'm doing. So I'm adding in a multiply node, and then an add node, and connect these up like so. I'm just giving that a value of 0 and that of 0.5. That will basically do nothing. But if we look at that, you can see it's all exactly the same color, so we've just basically nullified what that node's doing. But that gives us our starting point. When we go to the hue and saturation node, we'll feed that into the hue, we'll feed our grass color so far into there, activate that node, and we can see what we're doing. Now, what these two controls will basically do is that's going to be the amount of variation, like how far away from the default green, and then the add allows us to move it about a little, up and down the hue spectrum. Is that a term? I'm using it. Okay, we won't need much here. Maybe a point. I'll do it more extreme to begin with so we can see what we're doing. Let's say 0.2. So it's very, very clear that there's a lot of variation going on there, but some of it's blue. And then as I move the add, we're shifting it up and down the spectrum. So now we've got kind of blue and purple, purpley blue. If we go down the other way, it'll be like kind of reds and whatnot. Yeah. So we want about a 0.1. That should do quite nicely. And maybe set that to 0.45. It's a bit yellowy. About 0.48. Yeah, I think that'll work for us. So that is our blade variation. So let's frame that up as well. The reason I'm starting to use these frames is I recently watched Space Effects course by Gleb Alexandrov and 80 Burrows. It's amazing, by the way, give it a shot. But they were very good at keeping things nice and neat in the nodes, and I decided that's what I'm going to do as well from now on. So call that blade variation, give that an orangey color as well because it's both variations, and then we have our grass color finished now. So now what we need to do is build a shader for it. This is where the magic starts to happen. So we'll use a principled shader because I use that for pretty much everything these days, and we'll drop the color into the color, and already that is looking pretty nice. Still not enough particles though, is it? Could just because the ground plane here doesn't have a material, so I'm going to get a really basic brown diffuse shader just so it looks a bit more like mud underneath. Yeah, that does actually help, doesn't it? Little tip here as well. we don't have access to our grass material. If I didn't have this blade up here and I was just working on this plane, I wouldn't be able to affect it. So if you add another material to the plane and put in the grass material, it won't be assigned to anything, it won't do anything, but it allows you to grab the material, which is quite handy. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, building up the shader. So next we need some form of control of the roughness. At the moment it's just set to a generic 0.5, or we can make it shiny, which isn't that shiny, is it? Just catch the light if we can. Ooh, where's the light? So now we're kind of catching the light. I would expect that to look shinier. Anyway, doesn't matter. Still need to get it right. It's probably just the lighting source I've got here isn't. It's quite a low down light, casting quite a big shadow. So that's probably why the grass isn't catching the light that much. But if you had a higher sun, it would look really shiny. That would be awful. So let's add in some controls for that. Now what I'm going to use is actually this noise texture, because it gives us a nice bit of variation and works pretty well. So with that selected, I'll get another color ramp. I love my color ramps, I use them all the time. Sometimes when it's probably not even the best choice. just how I go. And then we'll add that to there, drag this to near the roughness, and then see what we're doing. So first let's bring this down. We want it to be quite close, we want it to be quite rough. I know grass does have a shine to it, but if you go overboard, it's really, really noticeable and it's not nice. So let's, yeah, even there's still some areas that are just a little bit too shiny, I think. Remember working with roughness, so the darker areas will be the shiny bits. Drop that in there. Yeah, that should work pretty well. Good. Okay, next step is, you'd think bump, wouldn't you? You'd think, yeah, let's go for bump. I experimented with bump nodes for this, and just the sort of distance you're going to be away from the grass, you do not notice it. All it seemed to do was slow down my render times. That made no visual difference whatsoever. So I'm actually not going to use a bump. I know that's almost unheard of, but that's my choice. If you really, really wanted to use one, I'd take the same source as that, or maybe that mixed with a grayscale of the blade colour with the stem going up, and then form a bump node like that. That's pretty much what I did, and it was a complete waste of time, in my opinion. What I will do though is put in an add shader here, and then add in a translucent shader, which will allow some of the light to pass through. Well, in this case it's letting a hell of a lot of light to pass through the grass, and we do want that, but not to that extent. So I'll drop in a hue and saturation node. I'll drop in our main colour that we're using there. Maybe do that so we can see that they're connected. Minimize that to get it out of the way. And then let's turn down the saturation a little bit. And then massively turn down the value, maybe a 0.3. Just want a little bit of light coming through. I did actually experiment with using subsurface for doing this, and that was looking quite promising as well. But this is the more tried and tested method, and probably the faster of the two. So let's stick with that one for now. And then add in a frame. And call this shader. Ta-da! Now, pretty much, if we go back to the reference picture I had here, that's pretty much all I did. Now this one is a little more complex. It's actually using the shader I'm developing for Blender Market. I'm doing a little grass model pack that I'll be selling, and that is using that. But that's for another video. It doesn't really matter. The principles are the same, and we're actually, oh god, going all over the place now. We're actually pretty close to there. What I would do possibly is adding, I'll do a couple of things actually, couple of options. Layout frame, and we'll call this, for lack of a better word, aging. Okay, and I'll add in an input object info like so, and then a texture, noise texture. Collect the location of the object info into the noise texture, and now it kind of spreads it out nice and evenly like that. Lower the scale a little bit just so it gives us some patches. Add in a color ramp like so, just to give us a bit more control over these areas. Yeah, maybe something like that. Kind of want to play with this value a bit more. I want some, yeah, okay. And then add in another hue and saturation node. Drop the color. That's going to go into the, actually no, I'm going to use a color mix. So I didn't actually plan to put this in the tutorial, but it's such a nice effect sometimes. I figured why not. Drop that into the mix node, bring the hue and saturation down there, and then pop it into the bottom value. Copy that over to there. And we'll also want that dropped in here. So it's basically the same setup we've got here, just drawing the coordinates from a different place. And now I should be able to create aged areas by mucking with the hue here. Maybe bring the value down a bit as well. Not quite right, is it? But hey, I think it'll be alright. Let's grab the shader back a bit closer, and then I'll use this as the color input. Go back to our full shader view, and now you see that kind of aged dying off grass effect. That can be quite nice, so I'd consider using that sometimes. Maybe even driven by a mask, painting a quick texture mask on the plane for the areas that you want darkened. Could go that route, I suppose. I'm just going to lighten this up a little bit. Yeah, not bad. But for the next thing I want to show you, that actually doesn't do us any favors, so let's forget that I did it. Well, not forget, but you know what I mean. Give me that. Oh, you're trying to be awkward. I want you as part of that group. Yeah, but I'm actually going to take that out for now, because I don't want it for what we're doing. What I am going to show you, and this I did have planned, was the you know how really nicely cut grass at golf courses and whatnot has those kind of stripes, that sort of stripy effect. I'm going to show you how to create that. So I want more particles. It's just not thick enough. There we go. 25,000. And only using up like 204 peak memory on render. Not bad. Anyway, for this we're going to need a, what's it called? It's not a gradient, a wave texture. So if we also have that being powered by the location, and we'll also need a texture coordinate one, won't we? Texture input, texture coordinate, there we go. No, vector mapping node, wake up. Bam, we have these lines going across. Awesome. So now we'll just muck with the scale until we get the kind of look that we wanted. Add in a, you guessed it, a color ramp, because I'm addicted to them, and just play with the values a little bit. Maybe set this to 0.45, and then this chap, if I can get it, to 0.55. That gives us nice thick bands, and now we can use that to do what we've done plenty before. Hue and saturation. Grab in our colour. And boom, like that. And let's up the value, maybe 1.5. Yeah. Add in another colour mix. Have that as the bottom, have that as the top. Check out the mix. Oh god, that didn't work, did it? That's because I didn't want that to go in there. Wanted that to go in there before the hue and saturation. And then that's the mix factor. Ta-da! And there we go, we've got our grass, our stripy grass. Just have to drop that into the colour. And then there we go. Not too bad. In fact, you might even want to go higher on that value. Yeah, well, that's probably a bit too extreme. But yeah, that's basically how you do that. The reason I put the texture coordinates in is so you can muck around with the angle of it, like so. And what you can even do is combine two of these, one at 0 degrees, one at 90, to create that kind of cross-cut effect. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just going to whack this in a frame for neatness. Dun, dun. Give that a colour of purple because it's a funky node group or node cluster or something. Got my little, oh god, don't want to do that. Got my little aging one over there, which, yeah, like I say, you wouldn't really want it. You could combine them. You could. Let's do that just for fun. So now that's the aged sort of grass along with the stripes, but you probably want to, in this case, massively turn down the effect of the striping because it would have worn out a little bit. Yeah, see? That's kind of was once really nicely made grass and now it's not. But yeah, you get the idea. There's lots you can do just by playing with these nodes. But that is pretty much that. What I will do is just take that out again. Let's just give it a render, shall we? So we can see exactly how it looks. Maybe turn up the samples. One thing I didn't mention, when you're working in the viewport, I've got my light paths turned down to practically nothing. It's like 1 bounce, which is perfect for viewport rendering. But when you're getting down to an actual render, you probably want it a little bit higher than that. Let's go. Give ourselves a little camera. Make it a square. I'll up the resolution a bit though, because I have a glorious 4K display now and I like making use of it. Something like that, I suppose. Whatever. That should work nicely. Let's just hit render and see how it looks. Now the render times aren't too harsh on my setup, but to be fair, I do have a 1080 Ti GPU, so that results may vary for you guys. But yeah, I think overall that's some pretty nice looking grass. As I mentioned, I am developing a Blender Market product. I'll of course be releasing a video on that when it's out, which is going quite a bit further than this, but I don't like, as I did with my Substance Painter product, I don't like creating a product without also doing a tutorial that will give people the know-how to do it themselves, or at least get them started on the right track. It's just the way I am. And I hope that this is what I've done here. Obviously, you would want a much nicer material on the ground. It does make a difference. You wouldn't have think it really would that much because you can't see the ground much through the grass. But it does, it really does, as does putting in a bit of displacement so the ground's not perfectly flat. That makes quite a bit of difference as well. If we jump over to that picture here, obviously that's a bit extreme. I sculpted out a bit of a shape there, as well as putting in displacement, but it is important to do. But yeah, I think we're done. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I will speak to you all soon.